I'd like to welcome everybody to the lunch today for our annual business meeting of the Jacksonville Onslow Economic Development, or otherwise known as your Committee of 100, as we've been known for many years. But welcome to this event. It's going to be our annual meeting and lunch, like I said, and we're very appreciative of you being here today. One of the things we'd like to do is give you a little overview of what we've done in the past year. We have a special guest with us today, and I'm sure you'll enjoy his comments. But as part of the welcome, I welcome you. I'm the chairman of this past year and the prior year. This will be my last year as being chairman. I'm Steve Wangren, and welcome to this gathering. What we'll do today is we're going to have lunch first, and then we'll go to the program. So I'm going to call on Bob Dupuy, and I'm looking around for Bob to say an invocation for us.
If you're following in your program, I'm not Hunter Hadley, and you know Hunter Hadley. If you would pray with me. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for living in such a wonderful area where one of our biggest problems is managing school growth. We're so pleased that we live in an area that is wonderful to work, to play, to raise families, and we are very, very appreciative of your blessings on us. May you look down upon us and our leaders to make great decisions, and I would ask especially this day you bless those men and women that serve in harm's way to keep us free. I pray to God.
I'd like to officially call the 2015 annual meeting of the business meeting of the Jacksonville Onslow Economic Development Commission to order. In doing that, I also would like to declare a quorum. We have a quorum here to do that, so we'll need to take care of a few pieces of business today. But before we do that, I would like to recognize our elected officials that have joined us today. And before I do that, I'd like to point out and to the commissioners what a marvelous facility this is to be able to have this here today. We appreciate you having us here, and it's a beautiful facility to be doing this at for the first time. So with that, if you'll hold your applause, I'll ask each of the electeds I'll introduce them, but hold the applause to the end. We have with us from the County Commissioners, Chairman Barbara Eichner. And then we have Paul Buchanan with us, Commissioner Buchanan, and Commissioner Jack Bright. We also have Sheriff Hans Miller with us. And we have several mayors with us. From the town of Holly Ridge, we have Mayor Anita Dingler. From the town of Richlands, we have Mayor McKinley Smith. From the town of North Topsail Beach, we have Mayor Dan Tooman. And then we have from the city of Jacksonville, we have Councilman Bob Warden. And we also have our clerk of court, Lisa Brown, with us today. And then from Senator Burr's office, we have Janet Bradbury with us today. And then from the Board of Education, we have Chairman Pam Thomas. And we have Earl Taylor, Bob Williams, and Joel Churchwell with us today from the Board of Education as well. And then finally, we have our new Division III DOT representative, Sandra Fountain, with us. And if I missed anybody, we tried. Who did I miss? Where am I missing? Oh, we... Okay, the one item of business we need to take care of today is an election of our 2015-16 Board of Directors. Our organization has 18 elected and 20 ex officio members, and it takes all these members' energy and effort to make this organization work. So we're going to take care of that today. But before we do that, I'd like to thank two departing board members that have served for a significant period of time, or in particular one. John Stevenson will be going off the board. He has been with us or on our board since 2009, but I think he's served on the board prior to that many years as well. And we're also have Bob Warlick leaving the board as well. And we appreciate their commitment and contributions to our board. So neither one of those of them are here with us today, but I think we ought to give them a round of applause in their absence anyhow. In 2013, Sheila got us into better organizational shape as far as our directors and how we should have staggered terms, and we all drew names and numbers out of the hat, and everybody got to serve 1, 2, or 3 more years, and then we rotate that. But because we now have staggered terms for all 18 elected directors, this year we need to elect 6 directors for a new 3-year term. The nominating committee has nominated 6 directors. You'll see them listed in your program to serve a 3-year term. Those that have been asked to serve and have agreed to serve are Jeff T. Clark from Jones Onslow Electric, Gary Danford from Wells Fargo, Cliff Ray from Ray Development, Matt Raymond III from Sanders Ford, Tom Rollins from Gulfstream Steel, and Chuck Azell from BB&T. If you would all please stand, Sheila says. Okay, they're here, stand. At this time, I need to see if there's any nominations from the floor. Okay, hearing none, I need to have a motion to accept this slate of directors. Got a motion to do that? I need a second. A second. Okay, hearing no other nominations, all in favor of this group of new directors, say aye. Aye. Okay, thank you for standing. Again, thank you guys for agreeing to serve. We have a very strong group of directors, and we look forward to the next 3 years with these folks on board. Now I'd like to call on Sheila to give us an update.
Thank you, Steve. And again, good afternoon. I think all of you in the room know Dan Oliver, my deputy director, my work spouse. I wanted to share with you that in coming here today, he gave me about 6 pages of data and detail and statistics that he wanted me to share with you. But our very capable administrative assistant, Cheryl, turned that into a very pretty, colorful dashboard report that we have put on your table. And if you promise to take a copy with you, and in the event you have questions, you call Dan to ask those questions, I'll shred those 6 pages he sent me here with. Your call. Okay, very good, thank you. No, actually, it's a great snapshot in time based on some year-over-year results of some key indicators in our community, and I think you'll find it interesting. I would just like to make a couple of brief points today before we get to our guest speaker, which is what I know we're all here to do today. I'm going to try to do these visuals as quickly as I can. Number one, of the dozens of inquiries and multiples of leads that we receive annually in our office that sift down to just a handful of project opportunities, it only takes a few wins to make a difference in our community. And an example, 2 examples of these real wins in our community are, we have one existing industry that has expanded over the past year, and this one I think I'm allowed to say is Stanadyne. We were blessed with an opportunity that due to them selling a plant in Little Washington, we were able to recover part of that operation rather than moving it to Connecticut. So they brought it into Onslow County. It allowed for them to make an expansion in an existing building that they had, but it did allow them to bring an expansion into our community. On the other hand, we also have one new employer in our community, and of course that's the ABC Supply Company that's going to be moving into our shell building and opening up for business hopefully really soon here. But between the 2 of those, an expansion and a new business has come to our community. We have 47 new jobs over the course of these 3 years. All of the wages are higher than the average Onslow County wage, and there was $9.625 million in capital investment made just from those two relatively small wins for Onslow County. So that's like a small manufacturing company moving to Onslow County. That's a big deal here for us. It really is. But these wins are happening in our community all the time. They don't typically get the fanfare or maybe the ribbon cuttings that a new business opening up might bring to our community, but they are happening all the time, and it's reflected in the numbers that I think we've given you. Sometimes the company might not want the recognition, whether it's a competition issue. Sometimes they're just too busy doing what they're doing to stop to tell anybody that they've actually had some of that growth. And sometimes it's just a gradual growth, but those wins are happening, and we all know that in this community we're very, very fortunate that we do continue to grow and prosper, even though we've had some bumps with the rest of the world's recession. So we're very pleased. We are experiencing those good wins. Another one that I'd like to share with you is that we have struggled to get the attention of a lot of the businesses that we've tried to court and some of the consultants because they initially only work by numbers. When they initially look for an area that they want to move to, they're working in huge databases and they're pulling out the demographics of whatever it is that their client is looking for. And we sometimes get lost in that. In fact, I've actually had some of these consultants and businesses tell me that they can't consider us because our population isn't big enough for them to be able to draw the workforce that they need. And that's a bigger problem than you might think. So we decided to try to tackle that problem, and I think many of you, especially the board of directors, know that we've been working for the last couple of years to really try to identify and make use of our military, the exiting military that we have. And that's another story in terms of the skills and everything that we've identified and how we're marketing that. But the picture that I want to leave with you today that we have been able to capture and document is that if you take the available workforce that we have in Onslow County, that's on record and provided by the Department of Commerce. It's what Ralph gives us all the time, the actual workforce for Onslow County, and you add it to the exiting military that are leaving into Onslow County every year, we actually have a workforce that's the size of Greensboro, North Carolina. And actually, truth be known, due to numbers that Dan reran last night, Guilford County. Now that's a visual. I think that puts us in a whole different game if we can continue to get that message out, and that's a part of what we're trying to do, is to make sure that we can let them know that we can play with the big boys, or the bigger boys maybe. So that's a part of the work that we're doing at JoEd, that we want to share that message. And Chris, I bet you'll remember that now when you leave here, won't you? Size of Greensboro. Thank you very much. So we are continuing to work more on that workforce issue, and that work continues to be underway. I want to thank our sponsors today. We have their logos up on the TV screens, and we have them listed on the back of your program. Without their generous support all year long of Jacksonville Onslow Economic Development, we wouldn't be able to continue to do that in the trenches work that we think we're doing a good job in trying to continue to promote economic growth in Onslow County. I also would like to thank Dan Oliver, my deputy director, and Cheryl Bear. I think she's in the back of the room, our administrative assistant. We have been wide open since the first of the year, literally wide open. You are getting your money's worth, and I'm getting it out of them. A little joke around the office Dan tells everybody is that I'm okay if they work half days and they can pick either 12 hours they want. But we think this is a sign of things to come. We think that the market is being cautiously optimistic, and everybody is out looking to do business. Onslow County is open for business, and we're doing our best to make sure everybody knows that. I'd also like to thank David Miller of Golden Corral and all of his staff. They've been absolutely wonderful to work with. Billy, thank you very much for the great meal that we've had here today, and for being a tremendous corporate sponsor for Jacksonville Onslow Economic Development. I'd also like to thank the Onslow County government staff, Randy Jones and Todd Lyman and Chad Ray, and all the rest of them have been just wonderful to work with. I think other than the first breakfast that the chamber had here at the beginning of the year, this is maybe the next biggest one that they've had from the public, and they've been wonderful to work with, and we appreciate the opportunity to show off our beautiful new facility. It was suggested that we close one of the sides, and we actually stood here and said, no, we want to show the opportunity that we have here. We may not have filled it today, but it's here, can be filled, and it's available. And we just are very, very proud of this facility. Without further ado, I want to get to our special guest, because I am so excited to have Chris here. I think some of you may have already heard Chris Chung speak previously, but if you've not, you're in for a treat. You have his bio in your program, so I am not going to read it, except to point out one particular passage. And it's the part where it says that in 2007, Chris was selected to launch the Missouri Partnership. Under his leadership, the organization was recognized by corporate executives and location advisors as one of the country's best economic development programs. He was dubbed a rising star by Development Councils International, which named him the industry's top 40 under 40 economic development practitioners in 2013. We were delighted in 2014 to be able to convince him to come to North Carolina. I understand that was something that might have been on his bucket list. And he did begin here at the beginning of this year. The Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina's board chairman, John Lassiter, who of Carolina Legal Staffing out of Charlotte, says Chris is well connected in the industry and is particularly good at nurturing collaboration between many players. Well, as one of the 17 board members that serves at the Economic Development Partnership, I can attest that we have high expectations that he's going to do just that. And quite frankly, we're pretty confident that he can. I have seen him in work already. I know he's got a lot of energy because he has crisscrossed this state, just like he's here today, reaching out to people to develop those relationships. He's very bright, he's very engaging, and most of all, he is incredibly committed to North Carolina, and I ask you to help welcome him to Onslow County.
Well, thanks for having me here today. Thank you, Sheila, for the kind introduction. As probably the newest person in North Carolina in this entire room, I'm going to reserve the privilege to ask the room one quick question just for my own edification. How many of you pronounce it Camp Lejeune? Please raise your hands. And how many of you pronounce it Camp Leisure? Because I've heard that too. Oh, gosh, I was hoping for some certainty, and you guys said 50-50. I guess I'll tweak it depending on where I am. But I do appreciate the chance to be here today. That is one of the things I was curious. I grew up saying Camp Lejeune, so when I moved here, of course, I heard the different variations, so I'm just kind of curious who says what. But anyway, I appreciate the chance to be with you all today. I do apologize a little bit if I'm lacking a little in energy today. I was telling a group that I addressed yesterday, my fiance and I just got a brand new puppy this past weekend. So it's a little 8.5-week-old miniature schnauzer / poodle. It's a schnoodle. Cute little 3-pound dog. Has not slept through one single night so far this week. So that's for us, we don't have children yet. So I've never experienced the whole thing of being woken up several times throughout the night. So I'm a little short on sleep than I might normally be. So please excuse me if I happen to slip up at any point during the remarks. It'll get better, I promise. So anyway, the organization I'm here today, that's what I want to do is just spend some time talking about the Economic Development Partnership for about 20 minutes or so, just help you all understand what exactly this new nonprofit is responsible for doing, how we work with groups like Jacksonville, Onslow County, and then a little bit of why the organization was created in the first place. It's an organization that many of you have probably heard about over the past 2.5 years. It was one of the ideas that was introduced about, I guess, late 2012, early 2013, as a way to remake and reshape the way the state of North Carolina does economic development at the state level. And so the end result of that was ultimately the creation of this organization, the Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina. But I suspect even across these 2.5 years where people have heard of this idea or heard of this concept, not too many folks have still had the chance to hear the exact details of what the organization is charged with doing. And so that's what I want to spend some time on today, so that if anything, when you walk out of this room today, you have a better understanding of what we're trying to do at the state level with economic development, and then how that perhaps ties into what's going on here in Onslow County. And then hopefully we'll have plenty of time for any questions and answers. Be more than happy to entertain whatever thoughts the audience has. And I often find that's a little bit more interactive and engaging anyway. But first off, the organization, the EDPNC, we're focused on economic development for the state of North Carolina. And I think one thing I'd like to point out is, first off, by way of background, you have my bio in front of you, but I've been in economic development for close to 2 decades now. This is my 18th year in this profession. I started my senior year in college and started with an internship and got right into the profession full time. So I've had the chance now to do economic development at the state level in 2 other states. For 10 years, it was the state of Ohio, where I was born and raised, and I did that within a public sector, traditional government agency that was focused on doing economic development for that particular state. And my work over most of those 10 years was about attracting new industry and new business to the state of Ohio, and then I had a couple of different management roles heading up that team of individuals who was trying to grow the state's economy through business retention, business attraction, and business expansion. Then from there, I was very privileged to go spend 7 years in the state of Missouri, heading up what was a brand new nonprofit organization, a very similar public-private partnership to the one we have in North Carolina. Got to build that from ground up and spend 7 years at the helm of that organization, specifically with the mission of trying to recruit new business and industry to that state. Had a great opportunity there. Really, it was a true privilege to be able to build something from the ground up and get to spend 7 years watching the results of that effort. And then come middle point of last year, had the opportunity to begin talking with folks in North Carolina who were looking at going down a similar path to what Missouri had done. They were benchmarking other states to see how they'd approach this public-private partnership model. That's how I got in conversation with the folks here in North Carolina. I'd always thought North Carolina, looking at it as a competitor for all of those 17, 18 years, always seemed like an incredibly formidable state, not just on the business front, but certainly on things like tourism and quality of life. Growing up in Ohio, a lot of friends, a lot of classmates, they'd travel down to the Outer Banks, or their families may have moved here to North Carolina at some point to get away from those Midwestern winters. Whatever it was not a state that was unfamiliar to anyone who did economic development, because they'd had a very good record of success over the years and were one of the fastest growing states in the country. And that's certainly something you want to be able to work in when you do this type of work. It's a lot easier to try to go out there and recruit companies to a fast-growing area that's seen population growth and all of the good things that come with it. So I'm really pleased to be here in North Carolina and now be part of the team in this state, but we have a lot of work to do. And what I want to do today, like I said, is just describe a little bit of what that work looks like for our organization. So economic development, to me, it's essentially about trying to capture private sector job creation and private sector investment, and to drive that as much as possible at the state level so that it benefits not just the state's economy, but also all the communities and residents who make up that state. It's as simple as that. We're trying to get more jobs and more investment coming in from private industry. But how do we do that? And that's where the notion of what specific work we're responsible for comes into play. The 5 areas that I like to talk about us being active in are where we spend 100% of our time. So the first is business recruitment. This is as simple as it sounds. We're out there trying to attract new companies to set up their operations here in North Carolina. The types of companies and industries that we're dealing with typically are manufacturing, corporate headquarters operations, food processing, data centers, distribution centers, call centers. I think Convergys has an operation here. Facilities like that. We aren't as engaged in attracting retail, so we're not trying to bring a Best Buy store here, bring a McDonald's here. We're not necessarily going after healthcare institutions. We're not trying to recruit new hospitals to locate here. We aren't trying to recruit educational institutions like colleges or universities. Those things are certainly important, just as something like the military presence here in North Carolina, a federal institution, is important to the economy of the state. But when you talk about the work of what we're doing, we aren't necessarily going after those sectors. We're going after more private industry types of corporate operations, i.e. manufacturing, headquarters, call centers, data centers. Those are the types of industry sectors and corporate facilities that we are locked in on, trying to convince to set up here in North Carolina versus somewhere else. And business recruitment, as you heard earlier, business recruitment does tend to get a lot of fanfare, gets a lot of publicity. It's probably the most high visibility part of the economic development world, because it's often, if not always, accompanied by a ribbon cutting, a groundbreaking, and a lot of headlines. And who doesn't love a good headline? And who doesn't love a good ribbon cutting? And that's one reason why when a new company comes in from outside the community or outside the state and sets up a big operation, that's why it's such a high publicity type of affair. So that's just one part of what we do. And of course, we're working very closely with Sheila's organization, because as we're out there trying to persuade companies to take a look in North Carolina to set up their manufacturing plant or their call center. We very much will rely on our partnerships with local economic developers to help provide us options around the state that match up with whatever those companies are looking for. And I'll spend a little bit of time later on talking about what it is that I think companies are looking for, and maybe how you all as business and civic leaders here in Onslow County can address those so that you're as prepared as you can be to act on those opportunities when they present themselves to recruit new industry here. But like I said, business recruitment, that's just 1/5 of the overall puzzle that we're responsible for solving here in terms of economic development in North Carolina. The second piece is probably, I would argue it's more important than business recruitment, and it's what are we doing around North Carolina to take care of existing industry. The companies who are already in our backyards, the companies who have already created jobs and already made investment in our regions, in our state. Because if we cannot guarantee that the companies who are already here feel like they're being taken care of, that they have the support and resources necessary to keep growing, that's going to make it very difficult for us to persuade other companies to come into the state of North Carolina. Any of you who run a business, you know just how important the satisfaction of your existing customers is and how much of an impact that has on your ability to convince new customers to buy from you. It's exactly the same thing when it comes to economic development at the state level. We have to take care of ensuring that the companies already here today continue to grow successfully well into the future, and that just strengthens our case for getting more companies to join them and locate operations here. So we have a team of field offices around North Carolina, individuals who are based in each of 8 regions around the state, who are responsible for working with Sheila and her counterparts at the local level, basically calling on a lot of these employers, primarily in manufacturing or food processing, or certain types of office sectors, trying to reach out to those employers and making sure that those companies feel like they've got the support and resources they need to stay in North Carolina, but also hopefully keep growing and keep adding to their payroll well into the future. So, new business recruitment, existing business support. The third area is in export promotion. Basically trying to help a lot of companies in North Carolina grow their sales of products and services to overseas markets. North Carolina generated more than $31 billion in exports in 2014. That includes everything from airplane fuselages being made up the road in Kinston at Spirit Air Systems. That's what they literally make sections of the aircraft and they ship them over to an assembly operation in Europe. But it also includes agricultural commodities, machinery and equipment, pharmaceuticals and chemicals, other types of processed foods. These make up that $31 billion in change in exports that are being made or produced here in North Carolina, but then sold to a buyer, a distributor, or some other customer in Asia, Latin America, Europe, or somewhere else around the world. And why is that important? Why would a state care enough about that result to invest efforts to actually assist companies to grow those exports? It's because every single one of those $31 billion in sales makes its way back here to North Carolina. It makes its way back to the companies who are producing these goods or manufacturing these products. Those are dollars that go back to those companies and dollars that those companies can then invest in growing their operations here in North Carolina. That's why it's so important for states to drive as much of that export volume as possible to help those companies. And a lot of these companies that we assist within our organization, they tend to be small and mid-sized companies. They don't have global sales networks like big Fortune 500 companies do, but they do have a successful product, and they want that product to reach even more of the world than just right here within the United States. So our team inside the EDPNC helps to find these companies who are looking to grow their exports, and then we leverage our international offices around the world to connect these companies with buyers, distributors, and other customers for these products in the hope that these companies will grow their sales to other parts of the world, and those dollars end up coming back to the communities here in North Carolina. So that's an important part of what we do as well. The fourth area is in the realm of small business formation. We often hear about the importance of small business to the economy, and not without good reason. Every company at some point was a small business, so you want to make sure that you're doing what you can to foster the creation of even more small businesses, recognizing that yes, some of them may not be successful, but the more of them that you can grow from the ground up, the greater your odds are that some of those are going to turn into really big enterprises that put a lot of people to work. So what we do in terms of small business formation, we are trying to replicate a lot of the existing infrastructure that's out there designed to help small business people. Many of you probably know Ann Shaw with Coastal Carolina Community College, but the Small Business Development Centers, that's a great resource for small businesses in the state. You also have the Council for Entrepreneurial Development, the Small Business Technology Development Centers. Local chambers of commerce often play a key role in small business assistance. There's a lot of great resources out there. Our contribution to helping small businesses form more effectively and frequently in North Carolina is through a program that we administer called Blink. It's Business Link North Carolina, but that's basically 4 individuals that make up our team, and they're an in-house call center. They field 15,000 phone calls a year from individuals who are looking to set up a brand new business here in North Carolina, and they just need some help walking through the permits, licenses, and other paperwork they may need to have ready before they can officially open their doors here in the state. So you can imagine these individuals, they know their customers, they know their markets, they know their products, but they aren't quite sure, just from a legal or regulatory standpoint, what do they have to do to get their business set up. And in those cases, we're fielding calls from anyone who's looking to set up a machine shop, to a cupcake bakery, to a Pilates studio, you name it, whatever it is. We get a lot of different calls from individuals who want to start their business, and we're walking them through those important first few steps of what it takes to just get set up properly here in the state. But then, of course, we're trying to connect them to all these other resources around North Carolina that are designed to help them with things like business plans or feasibility studies or all these other pieces of technical assistance that these businesses will need to grow into successful companies down the road. So that's what we do in the small business arena. So new business recruitment, existing business support, export promotion, small business counseling, and last but not least, especially for parts of the state like right here, is tourism promotion. This organization is also responsible for marketing North Carolina as a tourism destination. That's, of course, that means we're trying to drive increased visitor spending in North Carolina. We're trying to do that not just through individuals and families who are looking at where to vacation. Of course, that's where a lot of our marketing efforts are focused, trying to get those folks to come in from the outside, spend their money here, spend their nights here, and circulate a lot of those dollars into our economy. But we're also targeting conferences, conventions, and business meetings. Those are great ways to attract people in. I think some of you may know Ashley with with the sports organization here. Amateur sports tournaments, that's a great way for communities, especially to bring outside people in. Any of you who have kids who play sports, you know that your kids oftentimes participate in these traveling tournaments, and that's a great way because parents and families also join their kids. And again, it's a great way to get outside spending into the state and into communities. Film and television production, those are also ways that we're trying to drive visitor spending and tourism activity here in North Carolina. All of those activities make up a $21 billion industry in North Carolina that puts 204,000 people to work every year in the hospitality industry, lodging, restaurants, tourism attractions, convention centers, and all of these things that make up the tourism economy in the state of North Carolina. So, of course, another great way for North Carolina to prime that spending pump that leads to dollars flowing into the state and circulating within the state's communities. So those 5 functions: tourism, small business assistance, export promotion, existing business support, new business recruitment, those make up the universe of activities that this organization was specifically tasked with when it was set up back in October of this past year. And when you look at these 5 functions, the way I like to describe it is, by and large, the common thread running through these functions is marketing and sales. We are marketing and selling North Carolina as a place. One day we may be marketing North Carolina as a business location to a company that's deciding where they expand their manufacturing capacity. The next day we may be marketing North Carolina as a great place for a national conference to take place and bring all those conference attendees into the state. The next day, we may be helping a small manufacturer here in the state try to find a customer or buyer in Japan or China, and we're trying to help sell that company's product to those potential customers. Whatever it is, the marketing and selling of North Carolina really permeates all of what we're doing as an organization. And that brings me to the second point, which is, why was this organization created in the first place? If you think about what we do as marketing and selling, Any of you who are in business, you understand that to engage your target audience of customers, it takes money, right? I mean, frankly put, to go reach your audience, to market and sell your product or service, it takes financial resources. And the more financial resources you can invest into that marketing and selling, assuming you have a good product to take to them, the more successful you're likely to be. So, why do I bring that up? So this organization was created in October of this past year. It was set up as a public-private partnership. We basically took over these 5 functions, tourism, business recruitment, etc. We took them over from the North Carolina Department of Commerce, a traditional state agency that historically had done all of this work in economic development on behalf of North Carolina. All of these 5 functions were lifted out of a state agency and put into the hands of this brand new public-private nonprofit corporation. But why do that? Why bother setting up a brand new organization when this work was by and large already being addressed by a public sector agency? And I think the biggest reason why North Carolina did it, and the biggest reason why 15 other states around the country have also set up similar public-private partnerships, is leverage. Leverage of the private sector's resources in order to do more of the marketing and selling work that this organization is tasked with. So what I mean by that is North Carolina, the state government had been spending $17.5 million a year on these various functions, whether that was promoting the state for tourism, whether that was trying to recruit industry to the state, $17.5 million. And that's great. Now the state of North Carolina has essentially delegated those responsibilities to this organization that I represent. They've given us that same $17.5 million and said, okay, now you're responsible for handling business recruitment, export promotion, tourism, small business assistance, and whatever. And that's great. But the beauty of the public-private partnership model, the reason that 1/3 of the states in this country have gone down this path, is now, in addition to that base of public sector resources that we receive from the state to do this marketing and selling work, we're now able to go out there and tap the private sector for a base of resources that augments the public funding that we receive. That's what the private and the public-private partnership refers to. The types of companies that would be supporting this type of organization financially, it's no surprise that it's going to be companies in the banking industry, the engineering sector, utilities, railroads, other professional service firms, real estate developers, construction companies. Those are the types of businesses that you can imagine will benefit the stronger North Carolina's economy is, because that's indirectly going to mean more opportunities for their business. Take a Duke Energy, for example. Duke is one of our private investors. If we're successful in attracting more manufacturing and industry, i.e. power users, to the state of North Carolina, that's a great thing for Duke Energy. Just like it would be great for a railroad to see more traffic on its lines, or an engineering firm to see more business that it gets to do on geotechnical studies, or whatever engineering firms do to help with that part of our business. The hospitality industry certainly benefits the more successfully we can drive visitor spending into North Carolina. So these are the types of private companies that see a benefit to providing some financial resources towards the mission of this organization. And that's a good deal for the state of North Carolina, because now, let's say we raise $1 million, maybe $2 million in private funding every year to augment the $17.5 that we get from the state. Well, the state of North Carolina now gets $18.5, $19 million worth of marketing and selling activity. They get $19 million worth of work being done for the same $17.5 million that it would have cost them otherwise to do those same types of activities. So that's what I mean when I say that this type of model leverages what the private sector can bring to the table in terms of sheer financial support. Economic development, it's too important, I think, for just one sector to approach it alone. And I think that's why you're seeing this prevalence of public-private partnerships taking place across the country. Local communities, they've been doing that forever. I'm sure JOED is a merger of public and private resources. So local communities have figured this out for a much longer time. It's only been in the past 5 to 10 years that states have really gotten on this bandwagon as well, because the logic is the same. You're marrying resources from both the public and the private sector to do this important work on behalf of the community. So that's the biggest reason why states have done this. There's a couple other reasons that I'd like to touch on that I think also make sense for why this organization and why this model exists. The second reason is operational flexibility. What I mean is, the reason I started off with a bit of my background, I spent 10 years in a true public sector environment. So working on the inside of state government, doing economic development work, and understanding what the benefits or the challenges are of trying to do this work from within that structure. Then I got to spend 7 years with a public-private nonprofit model, very similar to what we have here in North Carolina. So I got to see how it's done from within that type of structure. This isn't about public sector can't do anything well and the private sector's better everything. People may say that. I've been inside both. You have good people, good motivated people in both sectors. But in the public sector, you sometimes run into some constraints and issues with the system that can really limit success when it comes to something like marketing and selling, which again, I can't emphasize enough, is really at the core of the mission that we're tasked with. A couple of good examples from my time in the public sector. When budgets are tight, in state government anyway, I don't know if it's the same in local government, but in state government, when budget times are tight, which is fairly often, you basically put everyone under a travel freeze. No one can travel outside the state. And okay, so picture what you're trying to do. If we're trying to engage with companies located around the US or overseas that we're trying to recruit to locate in the state, or if we're trying to go meet with a conference and convention planner to convince them to bring their annual meeting here and they're located somewhere halfway across the country, or if we're trying to find a buyer or distributor for a company here that wants to export more of their products and we need to go see that customer or buyer where they are, how on earth can we perform that aspect of the marketing and sales mission effectively if we can't even cross the state line because of a travel freeze? And that's just one example of one of those limits you run into when you're trying to do this work within a public sector. Another challenge is that compensation-wise within the public sector, any of you who are in the public sector, you know that sometimes it's really tough to reward your star performers. You just don't usually get that latitude and flexibility to reward the people who are doing a really good job. And if our success is dependent on having good marketing people and great salespeople, if I don't have the resources I need to attract or retain those professionals because I can't reward for performance, that's going to have a limiting effect on my ability to be successful as an organization. So now, by putting this thing within a public-private, nonprofit model, I think you get away from some of those constraints. Certainly you don't have things like arbitrary travel freezes anymore like you do in the public sector. And now we also have a board of directors, which is primarily business owners who understand the need to hire and retain good talent and reward those individuals for performance. So those folks are going to be on board with providing the management with the tools necessary to reward performance and really hold on to those star performers. So that operating flexibility, which captures some of these issues, that's another big reason why states have shifted from doing this wholly within the public sector to now doing them as a public-private partnership model. And then the last reason is something that I think is also a good reason that many states have looked at, is to be effective in marketing or selling, at least in my time in doing this for almost 2 decades. I personally believe the marketing message, the marketing strategy, they have to be applied consistently and on a sustained fashion over the long term. To have the traction that you want with your target audience, you've just got to keep hitting them with the same message and not just change tack every few months or every few years, or you'll never get that repetition. You'll never get that traction that you want for your message to really sink in with that audience that you're trying to reach. At the same time, we are selling, and anytime you're selling, you're going to have customers on the other side of the table, and the better and stronger and longer of a relationship you can have with those customers, the more probability you have of being successful. So our customers may be site selection consultants on the business recruitment side. They may be travel agents and tour operators on the tourism side. They may be export buyers and importers on the export promotion side. Whatever that customer audience looks like, the longer we have a relationship with them, the greater our odds are of success. Any of you who are in business, you understand how relationships affect your ability to sell. So why do I bring up the need for long-term consistent marketing and long-term continuous sales relationships? It's because these two things can be very difficult to attain when you're trying to do this within the public sector at the state level. And why is that? Administrations change. Governors turnover, secretaries of commerce turnover. That change is inevitable at the state level. And so every time you have one of those changes of administration, there's an overwhelming temptation for the new group to come in and just change the marketing approach wholesale. Just throw out the old way of doing things and let's put our own brand new stamp on it. That can be incredibly disruptive to that consistency across the long term that I referred to earlier. And of course, anytime you have a change in administration, by definition, you're throwing any relationships that have been cultivated during that time out the window. So the thought, I think, across these 15 other states that have approached this model is when you take these functions of marketing and sales 1 degree removed from that inevitable constant turnover in the public sector, you're hopefully insulating yourself a little bit, and probably quite a bit, from some of that potential disruptive change in relationships or marketing strategies. So to boil it down again, the 3 big reasons: leverage of private sector resources, greater operational flexibility, and 3, longer-term continuity and consistency in the sales and marketing approach. Those are the 3 big reasons why I think a third of the states in this country, and certainly there's going to be more after North Carolina, a third of the states have adopted this model of a public-private partnership to address state-level economic development. So I've spent a little time talking about what we do. I've spent some time talking about why the organization was created. Just a little bit more about the organization. As you heard Sheila say, we have a 17-member board of directors drawn from all over the state, mostly business owners, but it's very, very important to have practitioner-level experience represented in the form of Sheila and one other member of the board who comes from an economic development background, because I think just having that voice at the table, that's incredibly impactful for the rest of our board members. So we're really thrilled to have Sheila be part of that organization. We're not a huge group, 55 employees doing all of these 5 different functions. Most folks are in the main office nearby Raleigh Airport, but then we've got those field offices of individuals who are responsible for calling on existing employers to support those existing employers however we can. And then those 55 employees, they're supplemented by that network of international offices. So we've got individuals based overseas who work across all of the functions that I talked about. And we've got someone in Germany, someone in Canada, and someone in UK who's focused on driving international visitors from those markets so that when they come to the United States, they're spending their tourism money in North Carolina versus somewhere else. We've got offices in Shanghai, Hong Kong, Japan, Canada, Mexico City, and Europe, focused on finding customers for the companies that we're assisting with growing their exports from North Carolina. And then lastly, we've got representatives in Korea, Japan, China, Europe, and Canada focused on driving new foreign direct investment from those markets. When companies in those parts of the world are looking at setting up operations in the United States, we've got individuals in those markets trying to convince those companies to look in North Carolina versus somewhere else. So that represents the full scope of this organization. About an $18-19 million a year budget of public and private sector funding. We have a lot of work ahead of us, but we're very pleased that we have a lot of great partners at the local level, at the regional level, and of course within the private sector. So let me close on just a couple of thoughts and then open up questions. Most of the questions I'm probably going to get, I suspect, relate to our business recruitment mission. As I said, it's the most high-profile part of what we do, so it's often what draws the most questions. So let me maybe get ahead of one of those questions that I feel like I've been asked a lot. What does it take for our community to be successful? What do we need to do to be successful in attracting more industry? And that's a great question for this area. You've got something very few communities in this country have, which is this massive military installation which pumps billions of dollars into the local economy, and that's huge. I hope everyone, of course, understands how unique and how privileged this area is to have that in its backyard. But like any community in a similar position, I'm sure you want to diversify your local employment base so that the more other industries you have, the less dependent you become on just this one economic fixture. So in going out there and attracting industry, I always urge folks, one is patience. This is not an easy thing. Business recruitment, by definition, you're up against a lot of competitors. Don't ever assume there's not 49 other folks like myself trying to do this exact thing for their respective states. And I used to be one of those 49 other people, obviously. So it's very competitive, and that's just at the state level. We have a broad canvas to paint on when it comes to attracting industry because we've got every option between the mountains and the coast that we can tee up in front of the types of companies that we're engaged with. You get down to a regional level, you get down to a county level, you get down to a city level, and you can see how the odds become that much more daunting to try to recruit a specific company to your particular part of the world. It's not impossible, but it takes a patient, consistent effort, and it takes product. We get a lot of communities in my history of doing this who don't have any investment in product. They haven't thought that if they get a company interested in their areas, that if they don't have a site, if they don't have an industrial park, if they don't have an existing building, if a community doesn't recognize that those are necessary items to get a company to set up operations, that can also be something to be very sensitive to. We're out there trying to attract interest in North Carolina. But we know that if we get a company in through the front door and they're interested in setting up in the state, eventually they're going to have to drill down to a specific region, and then down to a specific county, and down to a specific community. And ultimately, most of the companies we're going after, whether they're a call center, whether they're a manufacturer, whether they're a food processing plant, they will need a piece of land to build on, or they will need a building to move into. They can't just magically put this thing somewhere in the ether. They're going to have a physical location. And so for communities to really be prepared when those opportunities come along, they really have to invest in making sure they've got that inventory of product if business recruitment is a priority of theirs. If it's not, then put your resources elsewhere. But if you all want someone like Sheila to be successful in attracting a company here, you've got to make sure you've got that product available so that when we're bringing these prospects in, or when Sheila's finding them on her own, she's got something she can put in front of those clients. Because ultimately, this is a real estate play. And that's why it's great that Sheila's in this profession. She comes from a real estate background. But I haven't had enough time to understand what the full product looks like here. But that's certainly one of those things that's very important. And then the second thing is just, I don't need to tell this to you all, but it's maybe more important for you all to tell this to your neighbors and other residents, is just to support your local economic development efforts. As I said, our job is to shine a light on the state of North Carolina. That's the product that we're out there selling, but we cannot do this job in isolation. It's not just the state or the EDPNC that's going to be able to achieve these results. We have to work with a concert of partners, first and foremost, at the local level. We depend 100% on the efforts of local economic developers. So it's great to see this kind of turnout today, because this tells me that the business community here supports their local economic development efforts. You'd be surprised that that's not always the case as you go around the rest of this country. But keep on supporting those efforts, because we depend on them in the role of what we do at the state level. It's an absolute partnership between the state and the local community. So with that, hopefully I didn't take up too much of the allotted time. I'm happy to get any questions folks have, but I really do appreciate the chance to spend some time with you all today in this nice new facility. And even though you didn't give me any more clarity on how to pronounce Kemp, whatever, I'm not even going to say it because I'm probably going to offend half the room. But I do appreciate the chance, and happy to take any questions at this point. Yes, sir.
You get involved with recommending legislative changes to make places like Missouri or?
Good question. So, one thing that a couple of things that the organization is not actually tasked with through that contract with the state. One is we don't give out grants or incentives. That's all still administered by the North Carolina Department of Commerce. We will work with the company all the way up until the point when incentives are part of the discussion, and then we'll make a recommendation to Commerce to say, hey, based on our understanding of this situation, we think it's going to take this much in incentives to win the deal. And then they can either accept that recommendation, or we can have a back and forth about what that right level of state incentives looks like. But the other thing that we don't do, and we're actually prohibited from doing, is lobbying. I can't go to a legislator and say, hey, Representative, I think you really ought to pass this bill or do this particular policy. And there's good reason. The reason they put that into our contract, they don't want us taking that ability to lobby and use it to get more funding for ourselves. Hopefully there's others who carry our water, but you can see you don't want my time being spent in Raleigh just begging for more organizational funding. My job is externally focused, trying to get those companies and tourists interested in North Carolina. That said, in the course of our work, absolutely, there are going to be times when we lose deals to another state, and there's going to be a set of reasons as to why we lost. Sometimes it may be real estate. Sometimes it could be a workforce concern. Oftentimes, it's probably going to be incentives. Another state just got more aggressive with their state and local incentive package than we were able to. The more times we can take that feedback and get it to the legislature, it's just like a sales team is going to provide customer feedback to the engineers. Well, in our case, the engineers are the policymakers and legislators in Raleigh. We can't tell them how to fix it, but we can certainly tell them if we keep losing deals for that reason, well, we're going to trust that they can hopefully do something to remedy that so that we don't keep losing deals in the future. That's how we interact on that product development cycle, if you will.
I have another question.
Sure.
How do you identify new and emerging businesses, like capital ventures, business ventures, okay, as an opportunity for attracting?
Yeah, that's a really good question too. There are actually firms out there that they can sell you essentially their consulting service where they're crunching a lot of data and they say, hey, for $250,000 a year, we can help you identify the 10 companies most likely to need an expansion plan. I don't know, that's a lot of money to pay, and I don't think anyone's figured out the secret sauce to predicting which companies are out there. I think you can generally say, hey, these sectors aren't going to see much growth, and you can get that sort of data very generally available, and these sectors are seeing high growth. And then it's a matter of putting yourself out in the field so that you're talking to as many of these companies. So a good way for us to engage with our target audience is we'll get to industry conferences. So if something like the aerospace industry is a target sector for us, maybe it's getting out to some of their major industry conferences in a way where we can interact with executives and decision makers from those companies and try to figure out if any of these companies are in a position to expand with a new facility. I think another great way we can do that, I think the value in going out there and talking to existing companies in North Carolina, it isn't just to make sure that we're supporting those existing employers and making sure they stay here, but they can also be great sources of intelligence on what's going on within their respective industries and maybe give us a little bit of insight as to who we ought to be chasing so that we aren't just kind of throwing everything up against the wall and seeing how much of that sticks. But you're right, that's one of the toughest things in this line of work is accurately predicting who's actually going to have that next expansion well before they ever go public with their decision about it.
My question was slightly different. It has to do with contacting those individuals who actually recognize and fund more fundamental new business ventures.
I'm not sure I understand that question, I'm sorry.
Well, there are a number of individuals, particularly on the West Coast, okay, that if I wanted to form a new company and I have a new idea.
Oh, I see.
Okay.
That's a great question. We don't actually interact too much with those individuals. Like I said, we focus a lot on established companies. As you can tell, based on what we do, the business recruitment work that we do is focused primarily on well-established companies, same with existing industry. We do some work in the small business space, but as you can see, it's very technical assistance. We are trying to replicate what's out there, so groups like Council for Entrepreneurial Development, they're doing a lot of that work and trying to build up that ecosystem and make venture capital firms and private equity firms aware of the great investment opportunities that exist in North Carolina in the form of all this promising technology and promising early stage companies. So we don't want to replicate something that someone else is doing because we've already got finite resources for a lot of different tasks. Yes, sir.
Could you briefly address the role of public safety to enhance the quality of life and to make a more business-friendly environment?
Oh, great question. So that's, you can generally say that certain industries or certain types of companies will have particular criteria of important to them, but the reality, as anyone who does this work can tell you, is these are very personal decisions at the same time. So how much public safety factors into that company's decision probably depends somewhat on the culture of that company, but more specifically on the individuals involved in making that decision. I'd say that if the decision involves moving a lot of people in from the outside, as opposed to just hiring local workers, then public safety is probably going to be asked about much more often because then you're going to have management and executives who are choosing to pick themselves up and their families and moving to this new community. And if they don't feel like it's a safe place to be, probably going to cause some reservation. Again, I lived for 7 years in St. Louis. You can imagine having just gone through the whole episode in Ferguson this past summer. That's one of those things where now I can guarantee you public safety is probably going to be one of those chief concerns of any company looking in a place like St. Louis, Missouri. But if it's a manufacturer and they're looking to set up a new plant here and they plan to staff 90% of those positions with people who are living here already, they're probably not going to ask too much about it. A great barometer, if any of you really want to know what's the mindset of a company, Area development, it's a publication that a lot of us follow, but they do a survey every year, and they ask corporate executives and business owners, they give them something like 35 different factors, everything from how close are you to an ocean port, to rail access, to highway access, to taxes. They say rank these in importance of what matters to you as a business owner when you're deciding where to expand. And they actually do a separate index of quality of life factors such as cultural amenities, schools, public safety, crime, and they ask people to rank those quality of life factors. So I don't know where, I usually don't look at that one so much as I look at the broader index, but that would be a good place to find the answer to your question on where public safety stacks up in terms of quality of life factors. But I will say the broader index, going back to my earlier point, the top 5 factors this year out of 30-some factors that businesses cited, highway access was number 1. You all are doing very well here. Availability of industrial sites and availability of industrial buildings were number 2 and number 3 on that top 5 list. Number 4 was availability of skilled labor. That's the first time in 10 years of following this study that I've seen available real estate actually outpace something like skilled labor availability as a criteria for companies looking at where to expand, and further underscores the importance of having good product that you can put in front of those companies coming into the market. So I hope that answered your question.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Billy.
Chris, you have seen, or we in North Carolina have seen our industries grow. What's the future industries that will grow the most in North Carolina going forward?
That's a good question. I mean, I think I see promises in aerospace. I mean, I think there's some great things going on in aerospace. You know, Kinston, of course, but you look over in Greensboro, they've got a lot of promising developments. There's a company out there called Honda Jet. It's the division of Honda, the automaker, but they ventured into the aerospace industry about 10 years ago, and their first sort of private jet aircraft are just now finally about to get certified by the FAA. Any of you who read Forbes, I think it's a cover story this month. You know, that's going to, they already have 1,300 people there now compared to 0 people there 10 years ago, because they're gearing up to start producing these private jets on a large scale. That's going to be great. I think automotive, of course, everyone knows that there's this ongoing quest in North Carolina to land one of these automotive assembly plants. That's important, but there's also a lot of suppliers that are already doing business here today. And with some of the new automotive investment coming into the United States, there's probably going to be even more opportunity for additional suppliers to set up operations here. Food processing continues to be, I mean, people have to eat processed food. I mean, that's going to continue to be strong. And we've got a good Commissioner of Agriculture here in the state who is committed to taking agriculture from a $78 billion a year industry and growing that to a $100 billion a year industry, a lot through the attraction of new value-added food processing types of activities. So that's probably going to be an area of opportunity for us. You go to places like the Research Triangle, biotech, information technology, those are promising growth sectors for those areas. Go to somewhere like Charlotte, they're so big in the financial services arena that's probably where they're going to continue to try to generate momentum. I think there's a lot of promising sectors, but nobody has a crystal ball for this either. I think that's what I want, you know, the earlier question about how do we predict which industries. If I could, I'd be in stock picking or something else, but the reality is you have to make some educated guesses, and then you have to put yourself out there in the market to try to engage with as many of those decision makers as possible to increase those odds that companies are going to take a look here in North Carolina. By the way, thanks for lunch. Very good. Bacon wrapped anything? Yes.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, Chris, for those comments, and thank you for coming down here today and telling us how it all works. We have some opportunities here in Onslow County to do that as well, and as outgoing chairman, I would like to, and on behalf of the board, I'd like to thank Sheila, Dan, and Cheryl for putting this event together today and all their hard work and making Jacksonville Onslow Economic Development a successful organization. So thank y'all. As outgoing chairman, I'd just like to I've done this for 2 years and worked with Sheila and Dan, and I'll be turning it over to Ed here in about a month, I guess. We actually officially turned over 1st of July or something like that. But I would just like to point out a few of the things that has happened in the last couple of years and that have been a success. We worked long and hard on trying to convert the old Hatteras building down in Swansboro that sat vacant and dormant for a while. And in the last 2 years, we were able to find a buyer and an occupant in Armstrong Marine, and they have just started kind of re-ramping back up and hiring employees. They won a contract to build some of the specialized boats that they build, and the aluminum craft boats. So we're optimistic that that'll continue to grow, and they'll win some of those federal contracts for, and that'll grow, being a growing industry for us, just like Chris mentioned. Won't be Honda jets, but hopefully we'll be producing some boats down there in Swansboro. The other one, as Sheila mentioned, we built a shell building at probably the worst time in the world to build a shell building and develop it, right when the whole economy across this country crashed. And we sat on a shell building for a little while, but we have successfully sold that shell building, have a tenant in ABC Supply, and we're excited about that because that gives us an opportunity to now move forward with some additional development in Burton Park. We are working, for those that haven't heard us say it, we are working on some ideas here for Burton Park. We have a subcommittee of building and sites and development, and we're looking at and working with the county on ways to get some more industry here in Burton Park, working on sites, potentially, another building, but primarily sites and infrastructure to get us moving and make ourselves attractive for Chris to send some people our way. So we're excited about that. The other thing I'd like to mention, just this past Monday night, the commissioners approved a site plan for a new industry to potentially use the rail line coming in here to Onslow County. A lot of people don't realize we had a rail line coming into Onslow County that could be used for private use. But through a lot of hard work with Sheila, government officials, the base officials, we're just about there to allowing this particular company to use the rail line that runs from essentially Cherry Point, Havelock, down here to Camp Lejeune. Camp Lejeune. So we're excited about that. We also continue to work on other options and areas in the county, and we're working, some of you may not know, but we're working with Tom Rollins and down in the Holly Ridge area with his business park called Camp Davis Business Park, and that's an opportunity to start looking at and growing on that side of the county. The rail side, of course, is on the Hubert, Piney Green area, or right here in Burton. And we continue to work with the city of Jacksonville on some of their issues in their parks. So we are focused all around the county, trying to grow the county and grow the employment base here in Onslow County. And we have a great story to tell, like Sheila said, with our workforce. We're getting the data. We're going to be able to show the data and actually make it where people understand the data to sell our workforce. So to hit Chris's comments, those things that are important, those top-rated things, we're hitting on all of them right now, and we're real excited about what the future holds for economic development here in Onslow County. So, Ed, you got a lot to do going forward. I'd also like to thank all the investors and partners that we've had with economic development over the past years. They've, without the private investors and the public investors, and I'd like to make sure I recognize those. The public investors are what make us tick. Private investors keep us on our toes as well. So thank you for doing it, because it is a team effort in what we do. Other than that, those are all my comments. I know it's we said we'd get you out of here at 1:30, and we're a couple minutes late, but we thank you again, Chris, for all your comments, and thank you for coming today.